Joining me to discuss the relationship between the two nations from the Indian perspective is Sadanand Dume. He's a journalist and resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute right here in Washington, D.C. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here.
So President Obama goes to India. He gets the full court, Republic Day parade, state dinner, the works. How big, how significant is this visit?
It's very significant. I think just in terms of symbolism alone, I think the Obama visit has ended what was an unspoken taboo where you could invite anybody, but you couldn't really invite the U.S. President to Republic Day because it was regarded as some kind of violation of India's doctrine of non-alignment. So what Modi is saying over here is that not only are we going to be friends with the United States, but we're going to be friends with the United States in a very public way, and we don't care what anyone else thinks about that.
You know, does it surprise you that Narendra Modi, the Indian Prime Minister, and President Obama ideologically are at opposite ends, yet they appear to have found some chemistry here, and they found some common ground?
That's a great question. I call them the odd couple of global politics. I mean, on the one hand, you have Obama, this retiring, laid-back former law professor, and then you have Modi, who is this, who comes from the Hindu nationalist movement, known as a fiery speaker, dramatically pro-business, and then you suddenly have all these stories about this personal chemistry. Now, there does seem to be some personal chemistry between them, but I would say that what is driving that is not the fact that these two guys are just naturally best friends, but the fact that the underlying interests of the United States and India are converging, and that is driving the personal chemistry rather than the other way around.
You've written a piece in the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed piece. It's a great piece, I read it, and you say in that piece, for much of Mr. Obama's tenure, U.S.-India relations have been marked more by drift than by dynamism. Explain that to us.
Well, you know, when Obama went to India for the first time at the end of 2010, there was a great deal of optimism generated by that visit as well. But in the subsequent years, in fact, we saw the relationship drift. And it happened essentially for two reasons. On the U.S. side, the Obama administration dropped the ball. They didn't have a senior point person shepherding the file. They didn't give it the kind of sustained high-level attention that it got, for example, under the Bush administration. On the Indian side, of course, everything went to pieces because the economy began to slow dramatically. And the Manmohan Singh government in its second tenure really was quite ineffectual in everything it did, including in foreign policy. And so as a result, from both sides, you kind of had this energy that had been generated being sapped. And instead of cooperation, the dominant narrative became one of conflict.
Right. The relationship appears to have changed significantly in a very short space of time. Just a year ago, there were just fierce recriminations coming out of India over the arrest of an Indian diplomat in New York.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the best, you know, the cliche in this case happens to be true. It's been a roller coaster ride. And both countries, we found last year with the Cobra Garde incident that some of the old bad blood of the Cold War years had not gone away. There was still the fact that because India was doing so poorly and a lot of these economic disagreements with the U.S. had come to the fore, there just seemed to be, goodwill had evaporated. And I'll give you one quick statistic. In 2009, almost 3 out of 4 Indians had a favorable opinion of the U.S. By 2014, that was down to just a little bit more than 1 out of 2. And that's just, I'm not saying that all of that comes directly from diplomacy and a fraught relationship, but it does show how both sides had allowed things to decline over the previous 4 years.
China is emerging as the economic power in Asia right now. So how important is it for India to reinvigorate this relationship with the United States so that it acts as a counterbalance?
It's very important. China is the elephant in the room in many ways. Neither country, and I think they're sincere in this, I think neither country is out to pursue some kind of explicit containment strategy. But both countries do have concerns about the unanswered questions. What does the rapid rise of China in Asia mean? What does it mean for India? What does it mean for the United States? And so as a result, they are being driven together. That said, it's not only China. It's not all about China. There are other concerns also. They have shared concerns about the destabilizing effects of radical Islamist terrorism. They do see the economic potential of India as perhaps the next big economic frontier in Asia. So I mean, China is part of the mix, an important part of the mix. I think anyone who says otherwise is essentially lying, but it's not the whole story.
I've been looking at all the reporting coming out of India for the past few days on this visit. The New York Times says India likes to portray itself as an independent actor on the international stage and has resisted efforts to align itself with the U.S. against China. Is that changing?
I think it is changing and it's not. I think in a fundamental sense, India is always going to remain an independent actor that guards what it calls its strategic autonomy. So India is not going to become a former treaty ally of the United States in the manner of, say, Japan or South Korea. That's just not on the cards. It's not going to happen. What is changing is that I think India is more willing to see where its interests align with the U.S. and go ahead with pursuing those, regardless of what other consequences may arise. I think that's the difference.
Right, as we heard from our reporter earlier on, the big headline out of this meeting was the civil nuclear pact. What did you make of that?
Well, I mean, you know, this is, I mean, it's almost it's a bit of a joke, right? This has been going on forever, since 2005. I'm hopeful that the two countries have, in fact, made a big step towards realizing it. On the other hand, for me, the proof of the pudding is going to be when we actually see US-built nuclear reactors humming with energy on Indian soil, and that we still haven't seen that happen. So let's hold our horses, be cautiously optimistic on that.
Are we going to see the United States now play a bigger role in India's economy, for one, and especially in the development of its defense forces?
Certainly. I think that is the hope. That's one of the central takeaways from this visit. As you know, Narendra Modi has been elected essentially as a modernizer. And there are two aspects to that modernization. One, of course, is to modernize the Indian economy. He campaigned on a platform suggesting that he's going to restore high growth. So that's his #1 priority by a long distance. But part of that modernization also is military modernization. He believes that India needs a strong military. He believes in a kind of Indian version of peace through strength. And that means that India is going to need great technological upgrades. It's going to need to spend a lot of money to get a lot of things right, particularly because it drifted over the last 10 years under the previous government. And there is no country except for the United States that can help India fulfill Modi's ambitions if you look at the scale of those ambitions.
We've had the meeting at a very high level. What happens next?
Now we have to see if there's follow-through, right? So both countries are very, very good at atmospherics. They're very good at setting the mood music, and so give them credit. They've done that right. But a lot of this comes down to the grunt work. How are the bureaucratic teams that are going to follow up on all these ambitious areas that have been opened up or that have been articulated? How are they going to then follow up and give them real substance? For instance, to give you an example of climate change. Now, in terms of rhetoric, we're seeing the US and India closer than they were before. But in terms of fundamental positions, have they really moved closer, or are they still, in fact, is there still some considerable distance between them? So we're going to have to watch that very closely in the months ahead.
Okay, sir, we're going to have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us.